Welcome to the Beneski Museum of Natural History at Amherst College. We're about to take a tour with Dr. Stan Rachootin of Mount Holyoke College. Stan began working at Mount Holyoke in 1984 and over decades has taught numerous classes on Darwin's work. Today he's going to take us on a tour of some of the key elements of the Beneski collection.
Okay, so we can sit on the floor here because this will be a few minutes as well. And we have till, our bus is 3:25, so okay, plenty of time. Okay, so starting down at this side we have, this is the traditional, every museum has it, that has the specimens, the story of horse evolution. So we start here with Hyracotherium, a little larger than the Chevrotain skeleton we had in lab, but not very much, and doing a thing very much like the Chevrotain we had in lab. It was a browser picking off the right kind of leaves, just the right leaves, in a forest. Mesohippus, anybody do a Mesohippus for a project in lab? The small horse that we had loss of teeth of. This is what the whole horse looks like. Mesohippus is much later and it's starting to come out of the plains. It's running around on one big hoof, but there are two sort of dew hooves hanging behind it. And so it's at the edge, it's doing some grass, but some browsing. And then the modern equus, the familiar horse we have around today, is something that, again, all of this happens in North America. And what's happening is basically something called the Rocky Mountains first, and then the Sierra Nevadas. The Rocky Mountains start coming up in the Cretaceous, and they keep coming up through the age of mammals, and the Sierra Nevadas come up later, and for a while are even higher. They are still very high today. They haven't worn down much. And before the Rockies and the Sierras, you had very little in the way of mountains in North America, so basically something called the Rocky Mountains first, and then the Sierra Nevadas. The Rocky Mountains start coming up in the Cretaceous, and they keep coming up through the age of mammals, and the Sierra Nevadas come up later, and for a while are even higher. They are still very high today. They haven't worn down much. And before the Rockies and the Sierras, you had very little in the way of mountains in North America, so moist sea air could come in from the Pacific, could come in from the Atlantic, could come in from the Gulf Stream, and everywhere you had forests. The Rocky Mountains come up, and what happens once you get a really high range of mountains, and say you have all these weather patterns coming in from the Pacific with lots and lots of water vapor coming from the Pacific, and it's being pushed up the mountain. What happens to the water vapor? What happens to the air as it's being pushed up the mountain? It gets colder. And what happens as the air gets colder to the water vapor? It stops being vapor and it starts falling down as rain, and it gets pushed up even higher and it starts coming down as snow. And then we go over the top, and by the time we've gone over the top of really high mountains, there's no water vapor left at all. What goes over the top of the mountains is just really dry, pissed off air. And so instead of dropping rain or snow, it throws thunderbolts. Thunderbolts at a forest which is now receiving roughly no water because all the water has been dropped on the other side, and we're in the rain shadow now. And so the trees burn up. And so this is a niche where there's going to be a lot of fire. And so plants are starting to get selected to deal with the fire. And how many people have ever kept basil in your kitchen or coleus in your dorm room, and it gets sort of leggy and you pinch it back and it gets bushier again? What are you doing when you pinch back a plant that has gotten really leggy? you're pruning it, but each time you prune it, then the plant, that branch stops for a while, and then what happens at that branch point where you pruned it back to? It grows again. How does it grow again? You get two branches. You get two apical meristems form, and you get a bushier plant, more basal leaves, more branches, a denser, better, a plant with better presentation and more leaves. Okay? But if fire burns over an area, all the apical meristems are going to be destroyed in that fire. There are other kinds of meristems on plant leaves. You can have what are called intercalary meristems, which are intercalated along the side of the leaf, and they allow the leaf to enlarge because you don't want a leaf enlarging only at, say, the tip. And you also have some of these meristems, which are the base of the leaf, and we call them basal meristems, and they are pumping up the leaf from the bottom. So what grasses do on plains, and this is not the primitive thing that grasses do, because the primitive thing that grasses do is called bamboo. But now we are growing up only from basal meristems. Fire can go over it. There's not much sticking above, so the fire passes very quickly, which means it doesn't get so hot that you destroy the basal meristems, and as soon as the fire has passed over you, now you can grow up again because you still have your basal meristems, and you can keep going up very, very quickly. Meanwhile, the mustard next to you has lost all of its apical meristems. Because it's lost all of its apical meristems, it can't grow at all. It might be completely dead, or if it can reform them, it's going to be crowded over completely by all the grass which has covered it up, and it's getting all the light. And so, the more you burn, the more grass you get. And this is exactly the same philosophy as the golf course. The more we mow it, the more it goes pure grass. Because we are favoring the grass, and all the other plants which have apical meristems are getting cut off, and they are being outcompeted by the grass, which can grow up immediately from the basal meristems, which the mower has not hurt. Okay, now we cannot do anything from the point of view of grass about fire, and in fact fire is our friend. It is making us the superior competitor here. But when animals come out and say, look at all that sea of grass, it is green, it is delicious, why don't I eat it? The grass can do something about that, and what does the grass do to about all the plants, about all the animals that are coming out to eat the grass? They put glass, phytoliths, little leaf stones into them of glass, which breaks up the teeth. And so the first animal to figure out how to deal with them is sitting up there. That's the camel in North America, a big camel. There's some little dead camels over there too that were caught in a big storm and covered in mud. Camels figure out rumination, how to deal with grass, which is a low-quality food, how to hide on a grassland where there's no place to hide. You run faster, you have really long legs, you got a big body, you got a big tank or a series of tiny little tanks for fermenting the food in the case of the camel, because the food is fairly low quality, but there's a lot of it, and nobody else is eating it except you, and so you have the world of grass to yourself. And then 10 million years later, the antilocaprids figure out how to do this, and they're even higher than the camels, and they're doing the same thing, but they're ruminating even better, and so they produce 40 or so genera of antilocaprids, of which we have one left today, the pronghorn. And they're, again, ruminants. And then finally, these forest-dwelling horses about here to say, hey, I could go out there and eat grass. So the problem is, they're horses. They're losers. They don't really have rumination. They have a cecum, which sort of rots the grass up, but not as effectively as a ruminant stomach. And there are two groups out there who are doing a spectacular job on it, the camels and the antilocaprids. So how do the horses get into the act when they haven't figured out how to do this yet? At this point, evolutionary biologists wave their arms back and forth, and rather than saying we're clueless, they come up with a word. They say it's an evolutionary relay, that you are egged on by the fact that there's somebody doing it well there, and they are the selective pressure on you, and then you're a selective pressure on them, and everybody eggs everybody else on, and somehow the horses are able to sneak in and do it too. Okay? And who knows if that is anything other than a fairy tale, but there's another place where two big, really slow animals, slow to reproduce animals, seem to evolve bizarrely quickly, and that's in East Africa. And both of them figure out different ways to destroy the world that they live in. Elephants are out there, which, have a long generation time, but they evolve really quickly. Hey, we can push down all the trees. Wouldn't that be fun? And we can eat the leaves out from all the trees we've pushed down and killed. And then people come along and say, hey, we can just burn them down. And so we get into a race with each other, and we evolve really quickly in Africa. They evolve really quickly. Maybe we're egging each other on. We won, by the way. That's where piano keys come from. But elephants could be part of how we evolved as fast as we did. Okay, let's go upstairs for